You scrolled through her profile again. You liked her post, then unliked it. You typed a message, deleted it, typed it again. You rehearsed what you'd say before a date like it was a job interview. And somehow, it still didn't work. Here's what nobody told you. Harvard researchers studied over 10,000 women, and what they found about female attraction doesn't just challenge everything you believe, it quietly destroys it. The science of desire dynamics isn't what self-help culture sold you. And the truth, it's darker than you think. What you're about to hear isn't opinion, it's pattern recognition backed by evolutionary psychology, behavioral data, and the kind of raw honesty most men never get access to. Stay with this. If anything so far has seemed uncomfortably familiar, that means this channel is exactly the right place for you. Men who understand what we've explained here move through the world differently. You'll understand why. Harvard studied 10,000 women and found a dark truth that completely changes how we see attraction. There's a study most people have never heard of, and that's not an accident. Researchers affiliated with Harvard's psychology and behavioral science departments spent years mapping the patterns behind female attraction, tracking over 10,000 women across different cultures, age groups, and relationship histories. What they found didn't make the morning news. It didn't trend on social media, because the truth about instinctive desire, when laid out in cold scientific language, makes a lot of people deeply uncomfortable. And discomfort, as we know, doesn't sell. What the data revealed was this. Women, across virtually every demographic studied, consistently reported feeling the most powerful attraction, not toward the kindest men, not toward the most available men, but toward men who projected a specific psychological profile. A profile built around dominance cues, emotional control, and an almost indifferent sense of personal authority. Not cruelty, not aggression. Something far more subtle and far more powerful than either of those things. The science of male psychology and female attraction had been pointing here for decades. Harvard simply made it impossible to ignore. Here's where it gets interesting. When those same women were asked to consciously describe what they wanted in a partner, their answers were almost universally different from what their behavioral patterns revealed. They said they wanted sensitivity. They said they wanted communication. They said they wanted a man who tries hard. And yet, the men they consistently chose, the men who triggered the deepest desire dynamics, operated from a completely different set of behaviors. This gap between what women say and what they respond to, that's the dark truth the title promised you. Evolutionary psychology has been trying to explain this gap for a long time. A study published in the journal Evolution and Human Behavior found that women rate men significantly higher in attractiveness when those men are perceived as having high status by other people, not just by them personally. This is status signaling in action. She doesn't just want a man who impresses her. She wants a man who other people already respect. That external validation loop is hardwired into her mate choice algorithm. Now here's where most men make the critical error. When they discover this information, they try to perform status. They buy the car. They post the lifestyle. They name drop. And it works, briefly. Because there's a difference between projected status and internalized authority. Women are extraordinarily calibrated to detect the difference. A man who genuinely occupies a high position in his own social hierarchy doesn't announce it. He doesn't need to. His behavioral patterns do the work. The pace he speaks, the space he takes up, the things he refuses to chase. That quiet confidence is not a trick. It's the result of actual self-mastery. There's a man, no name, no backstory, just a man in his early 30s who understood none of this. He was educated, successful by most metrics, and genuinely kind. He'd been in 2 long relationships that ended the same way. She pulled back, he tried harder, she left. After the second one, he didn't go looking for dating strategy. He went looking for himself. And the explanation is both simple and devastating. Women did not evolve to consciously select mates. They evolved to feel attraction first and rationalize it second. This means the part of the brain responsible for desire is not the logical, language-based prefrontal cortex. It's the ancient, instinct-driven limbic system. The same system that kept our ancestors alive. The same system that responds to status signaling, social hierarchy, and masculine frame, not to effort, not to compliance, not to desperation. So what does that mean for you specifically? It means that most of what you were taught about attraction, show up, be consistent, tell her how you feel early, prove you're a good man, was aimed at the wrong part of her brain entirely. You were speaking to her logic. and logic doesn't create desire. Think about the last time you felt real chemistry with someone. Did it come from a careful, thoughtful conversation about values? Or did it arrive without permission, fast, irrational, almost inconvenient? That feeling has a biological name, and understanding it changes everything about how you move. Sexual selection, as Darwin originally described it, operates on one core principle: females choose. But the criteria behind that choice are not moral, not fair, and not negotiable. They are ancient. He started studying behavioral patterns, not as manipulation tactics, but as a mirror. What he found was that he had been operating from a validation trap his entire adult life, measuring his own worth through how much she approved of him. When he stopped, everything shifted. That shift, from seeking approval to operating from internal certainty, is the single most documented attraction trigger in the behavioral science literature. It's not about being cold. It's not about playing games. It's about masculine polarity. When a man has a clearly defined internal world, his standards, his direction, his non-negotiables, he creates a gravitational pull that is almost impossible for a woman to intellectually explain, but physically impossible for her to ignore. This is what the Harvard data kept circling back to. The men women chose were men who seemed to need nothing from the interaction. Hypergamy is one of the most misunderstood concepts in modern male development, and one of the most important. At its core, it describes the female evolutionary tendency to seek partners who are at or above their own perceived level of status, resources, and dominance. This isn't a character flaw. It's millions of years of survival programming. A woman who chose a weak, low-status mate in the ancestral environment was choosing poverty, vulnerability, and danger for her offspring. Her genes learned to feel attraction toward strength. Those genes are still running the show, in boardrooms, in coffee shops, on dating apps, everywhere. Understanding hypergamy doesn't mean becoming bitter about it. It means using it as a compass for your own growth. The men who internalize this concept don't resent women for it. They respect the biological logic behind it and redirect their energy accordingly. Instead of asking, "Why doesn't she like me?" they start asking, "What version of me would be impossible to ignore?" That is a completely different question. One leads to frustration and resentment. The other leads to the kind of male development that quietly transforms every area of life. Not just romantic relationships, but social hierarchy, professional presence, personal authority. Here's a practical example of what this looks like in real time. Two men approach the same woman. Man A is attentive, enthusiastic, and clearly invested in her approval from the first sentence. He leans in. He laughs a little too fast. He asks what she thinks of him before the conversation is over. Man B is present but unhurried. He disagrees with something she says, calmly, without apology. He doesn't ask for her number. He mentions, almost as an aside, that he'd enjoy continuing the conversation sometime. Man A did everything right. Man B triggered something ancient. The outcome is never really a surprise. The concept of masculine frame is critical here, and it's widely misapplied. Frame isn't about dominance in the aggressive sense. It's about who controls the emotional tone of an interaction. A man with a strong masculine frame doesn't get rattled by a woman's mood swings, doesn't escalate when she tests him, and doesn't collapse his personality to match her expectations. He remains himself, steady, warm, but unshakable. Women don't just find this attractive. On a deep neurological level, they find it safe. Because a man who can't be emotionally destabilized signals that he can protect what matters. That signal is ancient, and it hits hard. One of the most consistent findings in evolutionary psychology research is what's known as the challenge variable in mate choice. Women consistently report higher attraction levels toward men who do not make their interest immediately obvious, men who create a psychological space of uncertainty. Not manipulation, not cruelty, uncertainty. Because the human brain, by design, values what it works for more than what it's handed. This is the same cognitive mechanism behind why we treasure a promotion more than a gift. Effort creates perceived value. When a man is too available, too eager, too easy to obtain, the female brain quietly files him in the low-value category. Not because she decided to, because her brain decided for her. Attraction mistakes, and most men make them silently, without ever knowing, almost always follow the same pattern. A man feels something for a woman. He decides the way to express that feeling is through service. Constant texting, prioritizing her schedule over his, shrinking his needs to accommodate hers. From the inside, this feels like care. From the outside, from the part of her brain that processes attraction cues, it reads as low-status signaling, as neediness. as the behavioral profile of a man who doesn't believe he deserves better. And the cruel irony is that the more he gives, the less she wants to receive. The validation trap closes quietly, without warning. Let's talk about emotional control, not suppression, but mastery. There's a distinction that most men never make. Suppression is denying what you feel. Mastery is feeling it fully and choosing your response. The research is consistent. Women are neurologically more attuned to emotional microexpressions than men. She reads your anxiety before you've said a word. She feels your desperation before you've acted on it. A man who has done the inner work, who has genuinely built emotional control through discomfort, through failure, through deliberate self-confrontation, carries a different energy. It's not performance. It can't be faked. And it is one of the most powerful attraction triggers that exists. Confidence building in the context of attraction is not the same as building surface confidence. Loud, performative confidence, the kind that needs constant external reinforcement, registers to women as fragility in disguise. Real confidence is structural. It's built from competence, from kept promises to yourself, from the accumulation of hard choices made correctly over time. It's the man who trained when he didn't want to, who said no when it was uncomfortable, who walked away from situations that didn't honor his standards. That man walks differently. His energy enters a room before he does. And that energy, not his words, not his outfit, not his opening line, is what desire dynamics actually respond to. Dating strategy, when it's built on psychological manipulation or scripted behavior, almost always collapses under pressure. Because a woman's ability to detect incongruence, to sense when your behavior doesn't match your internal state, is highly sophisticated. What actually works, long-term, is strategic authenticity. Knowing who you are clearly enough that you never need to perform. Having standards visible enough that her approval doesn't move you. Creating enough genuine tension, not through games, but through real investment in your own life, that she has to work to understand you. The men who master this aren't using tactics. They're simply operating from a self-concept that most men have never been taught to build. Power balance in relationships is rarely discussed honestly, because acknowledging it makes people uncomfortable. But the data is unambiguous. Relationships in which the man holds a higher perceived value than the woman, where she's slightly more emotionally invested, are consistently rated as more satisfying by both partners. Not because women want to suffer, but because the ancient circuitry that governs attraction is built for pursuit. When that dynamic reverses, when the man becomes the one who needs more, the chemistry dissolves, slowly, then all at once. This isn't cynical. It's a survival mechanism running on hardware that hasn't been updated in 50,000 years. Here's what the science of desire dynamics actually asks of a man: not to be cold, not to be unavailable, not to pretend he doesn't care. It asks him to care so deeply about his own direction, his own growth, his own standards, that a relationship, however meaningful, is never the center of gravity of his life. A man who has something to build, something to protect, something he'd sacrifice comfort for, that man is inherently more attractive than a man whose entire emotional world revolves around being chosen. This is the core of masculine frame. Not detachment, but depth. Not absence, but fullness. The role of social hierarchy in attraction is something most men underestimate. Women don't just assess a man in isolation. They assess him through the lens of how other men treat him. If other men defer to him, respect him, seek his input, she notices. If other men dismiss him, override him, or treat him as peripheral, she notices that too. This is why being a good guy in private doesn't create the same attraction signal as being a man who commands respect in public. Your social behavior, the ease with which you lead, the confidence with which you disagree, the comfort with which you take up space, is constantly being processed as mate selection data. Personal authority is one of those concepts that's easier to recognize than to define. It's the difference between a man who states his opinion and immediately watches for approval, and a man who states his opinion and simply waits. It's not arrogance. Arrogance is fragile. It requires constant validation to survive. Personal authority is structural. It doesn't need the room to agree. It doesn't flinch when challenged. Women are drawn to it with an intensity that often confuses them because it's not logical. It's the feeling of being near someone who already knows where he's going. That certainty, that quiet directionality, is one of the most potent desire triggers in existence. There's a reason why nice guys finish last that has nothing to do with niceness. Let's be precise about this. Kindness is not the problem. The problem is what the kindness is being used for. When a man uses kindness as a strategy, as a way to earn attraction he doesn't feel entitled to receive. It reads as transaction. And women, particularly at the level of instinctive desire, are repelled by transactional energy. The man who is genuinely kind, who gives without agenda, because his internal world is full enough to give freely, creates an entirely different response. His kindness reads as abundance. And abundance, in the language of evolutionary psychology, signals exactly the kind of mate worth choosing. Self-mastery is the infrastructure everything else is built on. Without it, all the knowledge about female attraction, hypergamy, dominance cues, and behavioral patterns becomes just intellectual content, interesting, but inert. Self-mastery means the daily discipline of becoming the man you claim to want to be. It's physical, training your body when your mind resists. It's mental, reading, thinking, confronting the narratives that have been running you without your permission. It's emotional, learning to sit with discomfort without reaching for distraction. Channels like Better Ideas, Hamza, and Improvement Pill on YouTube offer solid frameworks if you're looking for starting points that go beyond surface-level motivation. Male development, properly understood, is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming a more complete version of who you already are. The man who goes deep on this, who does the real work instead of the performative kind, finds something unexpected waiting for him on the other side. Not just better relationships, not just stronger attraction dynamics, but a fundamentally different relationship with himself. He stops asking what women want from him. He starts asking what he wants from life. And paradoxically, that shift, that radical reorientation of attention, is exactly what makes him magnetic. Not because he's trying to be, because he no longer needs to try. The behavioral patterns that make a man attractive are not mysterious once you understand the evolutionary logic behind them. Directness, because indecision signals fear. Stillness, because men who can't be still signal anxiety. Leading, not dominating, but initiating, directing, deciding, because the female brain, at its deepest level, is looking for a man capable of navigating uncertainty. These aren't behaviors you add to your personality like accessories. They are behaviors that emerge naturally when a man has done the internal work, when he's built something real inside himself, when his confidence building has been earned, not borrowed. That's when everything changes. Here's the part that most people never reach because they stop reading too soon. The men who truly understand what Harvard's data was pointing at, what evolutionary psychology has been quietly documenting for decades, they don't use this knowledge to manipulate. They use it to stop betraying themselves. Every time a man shrinks to be chosen, he betrays himself. Every time he buries his standards to keep the peace, he betrays himself. Every time he performs kindness in exchange for approval, he betrays himself. The attraction mistakes were never really about her. They were about him, about a man who hadn't yet decided he was worth choosing on his own terms. And that's the dark truth the title was always pointing toward. Not that women are complicated. Not that attraction is cruel. But that most men have been pursuing connection by erasing the very qualities that make connection possible. The masculine polarity that creates desire can't be faked, can't be performed, and can't be given to you. It has to be built, day by day, decision by decision, in the quiet moments when no one is watching and you choose to show up as the man you're becoming anyway. Harvard studied 10,000 women. What they found was a map. What you do with that map, that part was always up to you. You made it to the end. And that already tells you something about yourself that most men will never discover, because most men quit before the truth gets uncomfortable enough to be useful. So let's close with a real question. Not a rhetorical one. A question that deserves an honest answer, alone, in the quiet after this video ends. How many times have you shrunk yourself to be chosen? How many times did you perform kindness as currency, chase approval as if it were oxygen, and call it love when it was really just fear dressed up in good intentions? Because here's what the data, the evolutionary psychology, the behavioral patterns, and every hard-earned insight in this video were really building toward: you were never the problem. The framework you were given was the problem, and now you have a different one. Apply it, not perfectly, not all at once, but deliberately. Start by rebuilding from the inside your standards, your direction, your daily discipline. Watch how the world around you recalibrates. Watch how desire dynamics shift when you stop needing them to. Watch how the masculine frame you build in private starts speaking for you in every room you enter. Now, drop a comment below. Tell me, what was the one thing in this video that hit you differently? Write it out, even one line. Something like, "I was the nice guy who didn't know it." Own it. That comment might be the first honest thing you say to yourself in a long time. Thank you. Genuinely, Watching a video is easy, staying through the discomfort, sitting with the parts that challenge you, choosing to understand instead of dismiss. That takes something. And you did that. That matters. There's more on this channel built specifically for the man who's done pretending the surface level stuff is enough. No noise, no performance. Just the kind of clarity that quietly changes everything. If that's the man you're becoming, you already know what to do. You didn't stumble onto this video by accident, and the man who scrolled past it isn't you.